Okay, class. So, let's proceed to the second part of our Chapter 3 presentation. So, right after preparing the sales forecast, ang kasunod na gagawin natin ay yung pag-prepare ng production schedule. So, class, bakit ba mahalaga na i-prepare muna natin yung sales forecast? Class, kasi yung production schedule, naka-based siya sa kung ilan yung projected sales na magagawa natin doon sa first step natin. Okay? So, kung babalikan natin yung previous data, di ba, ang nakalculate natin na projected sale for the year 2019 is 40,868 units. So, yung production schedule natin, magbe-based dun sa figure na yun. Okay? So, ano ba ang production schedule? Siyempre, kung meron tayong sales forecast na 40,000 units, ibig sabihin, kailangan natin mag-create ng schedule or ng plano para makapag-produce tayo ng ganung bilang. Okay? So, before preparing the production schedule, kailangan daw muna natin ma-prepare yung sales figure, yung projected sales. Okay? So, it is the production schedule is highly dependent on the sales forecast. Every time na meron tayong changes dun sa estimate natin, di ba estimate lang naman yung sales forecast natin eh. So, mababago din po yung production schedule natin. Since ito po ay naka-based ay dun sa sales forecast. Okay. Kung yung 40,000 natin, 686 units, tama ba ako? Na yun ay mababago. So, mababago din po yung production schedule na meron tayo. So, the production schedule simply shows the cost of making or producing a product. Magkano ba yung magagastos natin to produce such quantity, such number of units of products. So, it reflects the following information. Ilan yung kinakailangan nating raw materials na gamitin para makapag-produce ng one final output or one final product. Magkano yung kinakailangan natin ibayad sa mga magtatrabaho or sa mga tao na bubuo ng product natin. So, direct labor cost yung tawag. Magkano naman yung magagastos natin sa lahat ng overhead cost natin na related sa pagmamanufacture ng product. When we say overhead cost, siya yung kagastusan na mahirap ma-attribute. So, kung saan, mahirap ma-identify kung saan siya related. Okay? Hindi kagaya ng materials, ng labor, specified siya na yung kagastusan na yun ay para sa materials. Yung kagastusan na yun ay para sa labor. So, syempre, meron tayong other costs and expenditures na related sa pagpuproduce ng product na hindi naman attributable dun sa materials and labor. So, saan ang pasok nun? Sa overhead cost po. Then, we also have the desired inventory level para maiwasan yung mga out of stocks na tinatawag. Kasi kapag nagkaroon tayo ng out of stock, ano mangyayari sa customers natin? Imbes na sa atin pupunta at makakabili ng product na kinakailangan nila, pag nalaman nila na wala na tayong stock, lilipat sila sa competitor natin. So, loss yon sa part natin. Opportunity cost yon na tinatawag. And in order to avoid that, kinakailangan din natin planuhin ilan ba yung desired inventory level na meron tayo dapat. Let's say, for example, kapag pumalo ng 3,000 units, kinakailangan na natin mag-reorder or umorder ulit sa ating supplier para ma-replenish or malamnan ulit yung ating inventory. Okay? So, yan, para mas maintindihan, lagay ulit natin or lagyan ulit natin ng figures. Okay. So, take note na sa production schedule, kinakailangan natin alamin ilang materials ang kinakailangan. Right after knowing or identifying the number of materials needed to produce one final product, kinakailangan din natin alamin magkano ang magagastos natin pagpapasahod sa mga taong kakailanganin natin para makapag-produce ng product na yun. Okay? So, for example, yung units na na-compute natin sa previous nating lecture, yung sa ating sales forecast, 'di ba? For 2019, yung 40,868. So, assume further that there are 3 types of raw materials na kinakailangan para makapag-produce ka ng one final product. Namely, si material AA, BB, CC. So, para makapag-produce ka ng one final product, kinakailangan mo ng 2 units ni material AA, 3 units ni material BB, and 5 units ni material CC. Okay? So, ito yun. So, para makapag-produce ng 40,868 finished products, imumultiply mo yan isa-isa dito sa mga to. Okay? So, kay material A, ilang material AA ang kinakailangan natin para makapag-produce tayo ng 40,868? So, multiply mo lang do sa required number of units. So, 2 ni AA, 3 ni BB, and 5 ni CC. Multiply mo dun sa ating sales forecast para makompute mo tong mga to. Okay? So, ibig sabihin, yan yung kinakailangan mong bilhin na materials. Okay? Wala pa tong cost ha. Ito ay number of materials or number of raw materials na kinakailangan. Ngayon, sa kasunod na given, ang ipo-project natin is yung cost, 'di ba? So, para ma-project natin yung cost, itong mga to, i-multiply mo sa unit cost. Na, magkano yung unit cost? Ayan, given dito sa kasunod na slide. So, to determine the total cost of materials required to manufacture the product, the number of materials requirement, ito yung mga yun, i-multiply natin by the prevailing price of the raw materials. For example, si AA daw ay 1.5. Okay? Kung 1.5 si AA, balikan mo to, at meron ka dyang 81,736 units na kinakailangan na material AA, i-multiply mo yan do sa unit cost na 1.50 pesos. Okay? So, yun yung total cost mo kay material AA. So, pagdating dito, kaya ang total cost daw to purchase material AA ay 122,604 pesos. Another important element in the production schedule is the labor cost. Okay? Class, itong mga to, i-multiply mo din yan sa corresponding unit cost nila. Given naman yun sa problem. Okay? So, for discussion purposes, si material AA lang yata yung nilagyan niya dito ng price. Okay? Example, ang kasunod na i-identify mo right after identifying the total cost involved in purchasing the raw materials needed to produce one final product. Ang kasunod naman daw ay yung magagastos mo sa labor or yung labor cost na tinatawag. So, it refers to the amount paid to workers who are directly involved in making the product. Kung yung workers mo or employee mo ay hindi naman involved sa pagmamanufacture ng product na yun, hindi mo yun isasama. Yung sahod na ibibigay mo doon ay hindi kasama sa labor cost na tinatawag. Yun ay kabilang sa salaries expense under administrative. Okay, so ibang usapan yun. So, dito tayo kay labor cost lang sa mga tauhan natin na involved sa production. Okay. So, for example, sa labor na tayo ha, Jenny Trading needs 25 workers to make the 40,868 finished products. So, based on past year's performance, 3 oras daw ang kinakailangan para makapag-produce ng one final product. Okay? So, kung may 25 workers ka na kinakailangan, at 3 hours, bawat isa. Okay? Ito yung kinakailangan i-produce. So, malamang, yung sales forecast mo na 40,800, ganda na sulat, 40,868, multiply mo yan sa number of hours na required para makapag-produce. Okay? So, tingnan natin yung computation sa next slide. So, since 40,868 units are expected to be produced, the total number of direct labor hours na kakailanganin mo ay mali itong nakalagay dito. Ito dapat yun. 122,604. Mali ito ha. So, in case the labor rate per hour is 8 pesos, edi magkano ngayon ang kinakailangan mong ipasahod sa mga empleyado mo, sa mga workers mo? So, ang projected labor cost mo sa pagpuproduce ng ganitong sales forecast ay 122,604 na required hours times 8 pesos. Okay? So, yun po yun. 980,832. ito ay per hour basis. Ano? Yan yung kinakailangan. Class, itong 25 dito, kapag may 25 workers ka, 3 hours yung kakailanganin. So, ibig sabihin, kapag kumonti ka sa 25 workers na hinire mo, malamang itong 3 hours mag-e-expand pa yan. Pwede maging 5 hours, gano'n. So, nag-stick siya sa 25 workers para 3 hours lang yung kakailanganin to produce one product. Okay? So, the manufacturing overhead costs, ito yung sinasabi ko sa inyo kanina, it refers to costs incurred in producing a product that cannot be classified as direct materials and direct labor costs. So, these costs include, among others, the salaries paid to the supervisor, light and water, the appreciation of machinery, fuel and gas related to production, and indirect materials. So, class, yung next topic natin is about the additional funds needed by the business. So, tutuloy ko na to ha, hindi ko na puputulin para 2 parts lang itong chapter 3 natin. So, ma'am, ano naman yung additional funds needed by the business? Class, diba yung ating basic accounting equation si Ale? Yung assets natin, ang sources nan ay pwedeng galing sa utang or pwedeng galing sa owners. Okay? Kapag ngayon, halimbawa, na-identify natin na kinakailangan natin yung 40,000 sales forecast, diba? And na-identify natin na hindi sapat yung pera na meron tayo sa business natin. At kinakailangan pa natin kumuha sa third parties or mangutang pa. So, yun po yung additional funds needed. Yung formula dito, i-discuss natin sa kasunod na slide. Okay? So, there is normal tendency that when the sales volume increase, kinakailangan din po natin i-increase yung production output. So, the moment that the production increases in order to meet the expected increase in sales, syempre, yung plant capacity natin, kailangan din nating taasan. Okay? Plant capacity, meaning ay yung mga kinakailangan natin na para makapag-produce ng product na yun, para ma-meet yung demand na yun at makapag-supply tayo ng ganung dami ng sales forecast. Okay? So, the expected increase in the plant capacity requires a corresponding increase in assets. So, a direct relationship between the sales volume and the requirement for assets can be observed. Ibig sabihin, pagtaas ng sales volume na kinakailangan natin ma-meet, kailangan din magkaroon ng corresponding increase in assets. Okay? So, didiscuss natin yan mamaya. Although, merong ilang assets na walang relationship sa pagtaas ng sales, in general, assets tend to increase kapag sales volume increases. Ano ba explanation doon? Ano ba yan? So, in accounting, the basic equation is assets are equal to liabilities and capital. So, once the assets increase, diba, it's either tataas din yung liability or tataas din yung equity. Yung nasa right side ng equation natin. Okay? So, an in-depth evaluation of the relationship between assets and the combination of liability and capital indicates that the expected amount of increase in assets is financed by the following: liabilities and capital. Sa capital, di ba, kapag kumita na ng net income yung business during the year, meron silang right na i-retain yung profits. When we say in-retain yung profit, hindi dinistribute sa owners. Kasi, ang purpose nila, palaguin pa yung income na yun. Isasama nila sa operation. Pero syempre, to maintain good relationship with the investors and the owners of the business, syempre, kinakailangan din naman nilang mag-distribute ng dividends. And pag nag-distribute sila ng dividends, saan kukunin yon? Sa net income. So, meron tayong, halimbawa, may 100,000 net income during the year. Napag-desisyon na ng management na yung 20% niyan i-distribute at as dividends, di-distribute papunta sa mga owners. So, ibig sabihin, yung 80K, i-retain. Yung 20,000, i-distribute sa owners. Okay? So, itong 80K, kung i-retain yan, nasa business yan, ibig sabihin, dadagdag sa capital yan at dadagdag din yan sa assets ng business. Okay? So, wag laging kakalimutan ang basic accounting equation. So, once the expected increase in current liabilities and the expected net profit retained in the business are not sufficient, dun po magkakaroon ng additional funds requirement. Okay? Kapag hindi sapat itong dalawa na to. So, to illustrate the concept, consider the case of Zenny Trading. In year 2019, diba, ito pa din yung sales forecast natin, this projected sales figure is higher by 4,158 units. Diba, meron tayong 36,350 sales noong 2018. Tapos noong 2019, nakapag-project tayo, ibig sabihin, kinakailangan natin ng increase na 4,158 units sa benta natin. So, upon the production of additional 4,005, 4158, 4518. 4158 yan. Antok tayong gumawa ng presentation. The assets of Zenny Trading in the form of inventory or finished goods increase. Once the 4,158 units are sold, class, kapag nabenta mo na yung inventory na yun, mawawala na yung inventory mo. Tama? Saan na yun mapupunta, ma'am? Sa customers mo, binili na nila eh. Pero, class, pag binili nila yun, babayaran ka nila ng cash. Tama? Pag binayaran ka nila ng cash, which is an asset, diba? Tataas din yung asset mo. So, kumbaga mako-convert lang from inventory to cash. Okay? Or possible, na binili nila yung inventory mo pero utang. So, kung hindi mo siya ma-convert into cash, mako-convert naman yung inventory mo into a receivable. Okay? So, yun yung ibig sabihin. So, clearly, the increase in sales results in increase in assets, either in the form of receivable or cash. Okay? Kaya kapag sa forecast mo, itataas mo yung sales mo, safe na i-assume na tataas din ang iyong asset. Okay? Be it in the form of cash or a receivable. So, now look at what happens to the other side of the accounting equation when sales increased. Check first what happens to the liability section. Tataas pa yan? Kung hindi naman yan ang maapektuhan, baka naman nasa capital. Okay? So, the increase of sales by 4,158 units requires additional raw materials and direct labor. In other words, the business incurs additional liabilities. Syempre, kung kinakailangan ng raw materials, ng additional raw materials, ibig sabihin, bibili ulit tayo sa suppliers natin para makapag-produce tayo ng product, ng increase in sales na yun, di ba? So, kung kinakailangan natin mag-purchase sa suppliers natin, possible na pwedeng tumaas yung utang natin sa kanila kung mangungutang tayo sa kanila. Okay? So, the business incurs additional liabilities on account of purchases of raw materials and salaries of the workers. So, this type of liabilities arises. So, kung tataas ang iyong asset, tataas din ang liabilities mo kasi kinakailangan mo mag-purchase ng raw materials and magbayad ng pasahod sa workers mo. Therefore, because of increase in assets yan. In finance, this type of liability is called spontaneous liability. So, siya yung increase in liabilities related to the increase in assets due to increase in demand or increase in sales based sa forecast natin. So, spontaneous liability refers to AP and accruals incurred by the business because of increase in assets other than property, plant, and equipment. Meaning to say, pagtaas ng assets in the form of cash, AR, or inventory. Okay? Pero kapag usapang property, plant, and equipment, yung dahilan kung bakit tumaas yung asset mo, let's say for example, nag-acquire ka ng machinery, nag-acquire ka ng land, ng building, hindi po yun kasama sa spontaneous liability. Tataas ang liability mo kasi umutang ka pagbili ng land, ng machinery, pero hindi po yun kasama sa computation ng ating additional funds requirement. Okay? So, it appears that the amount of increase on the asset is reduced by the increase in current liability. So, the increase in assets is partly financed by the current liability. Once the 4,158 additional units produced are finally sold, the business will realize a profit. Siyempre, pag nabenta nila yun, magiging profit na nila yun. Ang tanong, yung profit na na-realize nila, i-distribute ba nila as dividends or i-retain ba nila? Diba sabi ko sa inyo kanina, pwedeng i-retain ng business yon at paikutin ulit para kumita. Or pwedeng i-distribute na nila doon sa owners. Okay? So, however, part of the profits realized from the operating activities is returned to the owners in the form of dividends, while some are still added to the business assets. So, the amount of profit retained in the business finances the increase in assets. It serves as a source of funding to the business. Pag po binalik mo yan, ang tawag doon ay dividends. Pero kapag ni-retain mo siya, ibig sabihin, ininvest mo siya pabalik sa business, yun po yung bubuo ng retention ratio. Okay? Dividend payout ratio kapag, yun yung ratio na binalik mo dun sa, or dinistribute mo as dividends dun sa owners. So ideally, the amount of increase in assets is equal to the amount of increase in liability and capital so that the fundamental accounting equation is not violated. However, when the expected or required increase in assets is more than the increase in spontaneous liability and increase in retained earnings or profit retained by the business, dun po magkakaroon ng additional funds requirement. Okay, so ito yung formula. Additional funds needed is equal to projected increase in assets minus spontaneous increase in current liabilities. Ito dapat ay nandito. Minus increase in retained earnings. Yung projected increase in assets, pwede rin natin siyang tawagin na, ito yung formula niya. Pwede natin siyang computin by getting the percentage change or getting the change in sales minus current assets na present divide by sales present. Or kukunin mo yung ratio ni current assets mo kay sales mo. Kaya di-divide mo siya. Spontaneous increase in liabilities, change in sales minus kunin mo naman yung ratio ng current liabilities mo sa sales mo. Or di-divide mo siya. And then increased in retained earnings, earnings after tax minus dividend payment. Kasi diba, bakit nileless yung dividend payment? Kasi hindi yan part ng earnings na ni-retain mo sa business. Dinistribute mo nga siya, pinakawalan mo siya, binalik mo siya sa owners. Binigay mo siya sa owners mo. So, yung increase in retained earnings, again, yung profit mo after tax minus any dividend payments. So, next, illustration. Yvonne Manufacturing Company presents the following information related to 2018 results of operation. So, meron siya dyang sales na 7 million, current assets, non-current assets, hanggang dito sa retained earnings. Okay? So, additional information, the cost of sales is 60% of sales and the operation expenses is 25% of sales. Class, this data will be used upon preparing or upon projecting the financial statements. Okay. So, the company expects to maintain this relationship in 2019 and plans yan, to pay 60% of the income as dividends to shareholders. Meaning to say, only 40% of the income will be retained. Okay, will be added back to the retained earnings. Will be added to the retained earnings of the company. Magkano yung retained earnings niya nung una? 1,050,000. So, if ever may makompute tayo dyan na net income, 40% nun, i-add natin dito sa 1,050,000 na yan. Okay. Because of higher demand of the product and increased share in the market, the business expects a 10% increase in sales. So, saan tayo magsisimula? Magsisimula tayo by increasing our sales by 10%. Non-current assets, hindi daw magagalaw, are not expected to increase including non-current liabilities spontaneous to the increase in sales. So, requirement, magkakaroon ba tayo ng additional funds? And mag-prepare daw tayo ng statement of financial position. Okay. So, the amount of additional funds if required is computed by determining first the projected increase in sales. Gamitan mo itong mga formula na to. Okay? So, yan. So, una natin ipo-project ay yung increase in assets. Paano mako-compute? Yan. So, punta tayo dito. So, di ba sabi magkakaroon ng 10% increase in sales? So, kunin mo yung 10% nung sales mo. Magkano ba yung sales? Di ba 7 million? So, i-increase natin by 10%. So, ibig sabihin magkakaroon ka ng increase in sales amounting to 700,000. Ayan. Times 60%. So, nakuha yung 60%. Pag binalikan mo yung data, meron ka doon current assets amounting to 4.2 million. Using the formula that we have, di-divide mo or kukunin mo yung ratio ni current asset mo over your sales. So, in this case is yung 60%. Kaya, ang projected increase in sales mo ay 420,000 pesos. Next, kasunod na kukumputin ay spontaneous increase in current liabilities. Paano kumputin yun? Kunin mo ulit yung increase in sales. E di yung 700,000 ulit yun. Kunin mo naman ngayon yung ratio ng current liabilities mo over your sales. So, in this case, meron kang 980,000 current liabilities divided by 7 million na sales. So, ibig sabihin, 14% yung ratio. Ang spontaneous increase in current liabilities mo ay 98,000 pesos. Next. The next procedure is to determine the expected earnings after tax by preparing a projected statement of comprehensive income. Sa ABM 5, tuturuan ko kayo mag-prepare ng income statement doon. So, ito po yung format or proforma ng ating income statement. We begin with sales. So, di ba ang projected sales na natin ay from 7 million, mag-i-increase ng 10%. So, ang shortcut doon, di ba, ay times 1.10 or 110%. Meron tayong 7.7 million forecasted sales. So, less cost of sales. Based dun sa given dito. Wait lang. Ito mga to yung gagamitin natin pagpo-project eh. Ayan o. 60% daw ang cost of sales. Ang OPEX, 25%. Ang interest expense, 245,000. And ang applicable tax rate ay 30%. Lahat yan, i-apply natin pagpo-project ng comprehensive income. So, meron na tayong 7.7. Cost of sales na 60%, dun kinuha. So, 7.7 million ang basis mo ha, times 60%. So, 4,620 ang cost of sales. So, ang gross profit natin, minus mo lang yan, dalawang yan, 3,080,000 pesos. Ileless natin yung operating expenses. Sabi dun sa problem, 25% daw yung OPEX. So, 25% na rin nung iyong sales, nung ating forecasted sales. So, ibig sabihin, ang operating expenses ay 1,925,000 pesos. So, i-less mo yan sa gross profit mo. Meron ka ngayong tinatawag na income before interest and taxes amounting to 1,155,000 pesos. Less interest expense na given sa problem which is yung 245,000 pesos. So, meron na tayo ngayong income before taxes. Ibig sabihin ng before, hindi mo pa binabawas. Yun yung ibig sabihin. So, itong 910,000, babawasan pa natin ng 30% na tax. Ito yung tax rate given din sa problem. So, meron kang ibabawas na 273,000 na tax na kukurakot. And char. Yan ay ibibigay sa government, i-remit sa BIR. So, ang net income ng business after tax ay 637,000 pesos. Eh, di baga, sabi sa problem, 60% ay i-distribute as dividends. So, ibig sabihin, 60% ng income, computin mo, ma'am, 382,200. Yan po yung i-distribute dun sa owners. Magkano ang mariretain? Kung ganyan, eh di ma'am, ang i-retain po sa business or yung portion na hindi i-distribute ay 40%. So, magkano ang 40% ng 637,000? Ito yun. Ibig sabihin, the increase in retained earnings amounts to 254,800. Pwedeng gantong computation or pwedeng i-minus mo na lang. From the total net income after tax, minus mo yung dividends na i-distribute or babayaran. Based on the above computations, the amount of additional funds needed is computed as follows. So, projected increase in sales, na-compute natin kanina for 20,000. Spontaneous increase in current liabilities na 98,000. And increase in retained earnings, just get the difference ha. Yung kung magkano yung income mo at magkano yung ibabalik mo doon. Or magkano yung i-distribute mo. Yung difference nun, ibig sabihin yung 254,800, ibabalik mo yan ngayon. Magpo-form part na yan ng capital ng owners din sa business and then assets. Dadagdag sa assets. Okay? So, ibig sabihin pala, kung meron kang increase in sales na 420,000, magkakaroon ng increase in liab at increase in retained earnings. Ma'am, kulang ka pa ng 67,200. Ibig sabihin, yan yung kinakailangan mong hiramin sa labas pa. Okay? So, kapag nag-project na tayo ng financial statement, ito siya, ng financial position. So, ang current assets mo dyan, tataas siya. Sa pagtaas ng sales mo, tataas din yung current assets mo for 620 na. From 4.2, dagdagan mo ng 10%, kaya magiging 4,620,000. Sabi sa problem, hindi naman daw magagalaw ang non-current assets. So, 2.8 million pa din based sa given. So, ang total assets natin ay 7,420,000. Less current liabilities. Sabi, tataas din daw ang current liabilities. Diba? Yung spontaneous liabilities natin. So, from 980,000, dagdagan mo ng 10%. Ito na siya. Yung non-current liabilities, hindi naman magagalaw. So, kunin mo pa din yung given dun sa data. Yung given dun sa problem. So, ang ating liabilities ay 1,848,000. Ang shareholders equity natin, may ordinary share na given, hindi naman yun magagalaw, 4.2 million. Pero yung retained earnings natin na originally or initially na 1,050,000 pesos, madadagdagan na siya ngayon nung galing sa kinita ng business during the year. 'Di ba? Ito yung 40% ng income after interest and tax na kinompute natin kanina. So, from 1,050,000, magiging na siyang 1,304,800 right after adding 254,800. So, ang total shareholders equity natin ay itong dalawa, si ordinary share at si retained earnings. So, pag pinagsama mo si liabilities and si retained earnings, meron kang 7,352,800. Class, hindi ka balance kasi ang assets mo 7,420,000 at ang iyong total liabilities and equity kulang. 7,352,800 lang. Ibig sabihin, kinakailangan mo pa talagang humiram ng additional funds. Yung difference niya na 67,200, di ba? Yun din yung na-compute natin dito. Yun din yung na-compute natin dito sa previous slide. Ayun, no. Okay. So, yan. So, ibig sabihin, tama ang ating computation. Kapag hindi ka nanghiram ng 67,200 additional funds, hindi magiging balanse ang accounting equation mo. So, the accounting equation that assets are equal to liability and capital will not be satisfied. So, after determining the amounts to be raised in view of the increase in sales, this query should be answered. Where will the business source out the much needed funds? I-discuss daw yan sa kasunod na chapter. Pwedeng sa financial institution or pwedeng magkaroon ng additional investments in the owners. Okay, class. So, this ends my Chapter 3 presentation in business finance. I hope na may natutunan kayo somehow. Mas maganda sana siyang ituro face-to-face. Kaso nga ay, alam nyo na yun, pandemic. So, pagtsagaan nyo muna itong recorded video lecture ko. Goodbye, class. See you on synchro session. Okay. Please prepare, ha? please be prepared for uh, graded recitation and activity as well. Goodbye, class.